Dave, can I start by asking, first of all, how it feels to be past finally, fit and proper?
I think it's good. I was asked the question about whether I feel relieved, in fact, previously, and it's really not so much relieved in the sense that, as I said before, I was always confident about the outcome, but it certainly has been very frustrating to have gone through the process of the general meeting and then had this period of inactivity where I had to sit in the sidelines when I felt that there was some stuff had to be done. So I'm delighted that it's finally out of the way and I can now get my feet under the table.
When do you become chairman?
That should happen on Friday at the first board meeting. At the moment I have been appointed a director, and we'll have our first board meeting following that appointment tomorrow.
How much cash do you need to put in and when will you put it in?
We don't know the amount of cash yet. If you were to ask me, the best I could really honestly say is I still think it'll be substantial. We are in the process of going through the budgets at the moment. It's very, very clear that the club will need I think fairly substantial funds in the short to medium term to bridge the revenue gap while we kind of get back to the Premier League. The exact amount and the timing will depend to some extent on what happens over the next week.
You said, I think, previously that over the next few years, upwards of 20 million, perhaps more than that, would be needed. Do you still feel that?
I think I've gone on record before as saying I estimated about 30. I say we are going through numbers at the moment, but I would still say the number of 30 is probably what I think the gap would be, assuming normal commercial activities resume and the fans start supporting and we get the normal amount of season tickets we'd expect. I'd still say the number could be about 30.
But you don't know when or how much of that needs to go in now?
No, because it really depends on where we are next season, and a big part of that I think is going to be the return to the Premier League. Our first year back in the league, we'll be expecting to compete with Celtic. It's our natural competition, and hopefully within the first year we will get Europa League income.
Will some of that cash initially be used to pay off Mike Ashley's loan?
I would be surprised if that would happen initially. I think that the Mike Ashley loan situation is something we're looking at, but that's really part of a bigger and broader relationship. My personal view and is something I'm looking at the moment is that the whole Sports Direct Ashley relationship is an integrated, holistic relationship. So I don't think it's just about the loan account; it's really about the broader relationship.
How much money is in the bank right now, Mr. Pugh? How much money is in the bank at the moment that you've come in to find?
I haven't looked at the bank balance. I think that
the club is fully solvent and able to meet its obligations, so there's no financial issues for the club at the moment.
Is there any debt? Has there covered any debt?
Apart from the £5 million loan from Mike Ashley, there's no debt in the club now.
How will short-term financing be structured? Will it be for equity as you discussed before, or will it be investment loans?
Well, I think one of the issues is obviously that you have to go through shareholder approvals and shareholder structures. We also have to relist the club on one of the stock exchanges, and we are talking to ISDX, which we've said before, and we remain confident of being able to relist the club on the ISDX exchange. We feel an obligation to, it's a large number of small shareholders we've got, to provide a mechanism so they can buy and sell shares. So that process takes time. It will require a prospectus. We'll probably raise money at the same time as issuing the prospectus, because obviously it's expensive to do these things. We may as well do both things at the same time, but that takes a bit of time. So there may be a need for sort of short-term funding to get us to the point of then relisting the club back on ISDX. But obviously, now that Dave has joined the board, that process can now start. So really, a lot of the plans we've had have been delayed, and for good reason, until Dave's joined the board. That's now happened. We can now move forward and actually start to execute some of these things going forward.
Paul, in the weeks since that you won the EGM, obviously Dave has had his issues to deal with. You've had a chance to look at the books. Is there anything startling in there that you found which you feel, I suppose, can be made public?
Well, I think the way I'd put it is, obviously, I think Rangers is a kind of unique story. I think a lot of the things that happen at Rangers have been made public already. Obviously, it's a lot of reporting on Rangers, and I think a lot of the things that exist you would probably know about. It's some shape or form. I think the way I put it is there's a wide range of issues. There's a lot of issues, and as I've said before, literally every part of the club is broken. Be it the commercial side, be it the youth development, be it this, be it that. And that's not any criticism of anyone who's at the club. It's just because of the what's happened in the last couple of years. and we have to rebuild the club really brick by brick. So obviously, given that's the case, there's obviously a wide range of issues across the board. I think to answer your question, I don't think there's anything that we've come across which is catastrophic or terminal or threatening to the club's existence. So I think it's just a question of working through all these issues. Obviously, recapitalising the club with money. We need some time to do all that. We need patience from the supporters, and I think working together we can rebuild this club. There's no question about that. I think you can see last night, just the size of the club, and I think with proper management, proper people on the board, that can happen pretty quickly.
Hey, just returning to like Ashley in Sports Direct, you mentioned that this is a kind of holistic process that needs to be dealt with. There will be a lot of people who are saying, why can't you just get Sports Direct out of the picture now, and maybe don't understand the detail on this. Do you feel that you can potentially use the loan that he's got as a bargaining chip? Do you feel that there's more that can be dug out of that?
I don't think it's a bargaining chip. I think the fact is there are legal relationships in place. You can't just walk away from legal relationships, and you also can't walk away from a commercial arrangement unless you've got some alternative, because the commercial revenues are very, very important to the club. But if one looks at the loan, I certainly don't consider the loan as being something that was made in isolation. It's connected to a broader relationship over a long period of time, which is why I think what we will seek to do is what we've said before, is to try and renegotiate that commercial relationship, because certainly in my view, and it's not something we've spoken about in the last days, but I've been kind of independently looking at the relationship. I think right now it's not a balanced relationship, and I think it's something that has to be dealt with, and quite smartly.
Will you meet with Mike or his associates?
Not necessarily with Mike Ashley. I think the relationship is with Sports Direct, and they will decide, I guess, who they want to meet. But I think certainly the club should be meeting with Sports Direct and trying to map a better way forward in the interest of the football club.
Sorry, Dave, there's a request in for a general meeting. Do you expect that to go ahead?
Yes, I do expect it to go ahead.
Do you expect the shareholders to vote to pay the loan back?
Well, the shareholders can't vote to pay the loan back. I mean, the general meeting is a bit of a nonsense, I think, in that sense. And the shareholders can't tell the board how to behave. The board will make a decision in the best interest of the club. So I think that meeting will go ahead. But as far as that specific resolution, I regard that as being a non-event.
So do you think that resolution will be rewritten or taken off the table?
Well, for shareholders, for shareholders to give a mandate or an instruction to the board, it requires a special resolution. And the board faced with a special resolution. This is not a special resolution. It's just an ordinary resolution. So it's the type of thing that if there was a vote in favour of shareholders that said we think that money should be repaid, it's certainly something that the director should think about, because it's the wish of shareholders, but they're certainly no obligation to do so. And given my earlier statement where I indicated that I don't see the loan as being something in isolation from the rest of the relationship, I really see a need to renegotiate the holistic relationship which incorporates what should happen with that loan.
Would you concede though, Dave, that the relationship between the board, the club and Sports Direct, Mike Ashley, is not great, and that's something that has to be dealt with?
I would certainly agree it's not great, and it's something that has to be dealt with, but I don't think it's terrible either. I think that the Mike Ashley situation is very, very different from some of the other history of the club. You've got a man, he's a businessman, he's been very, very aggressive, and he's managed to, I think, put in place a deal that's very, very favourable to him. And he's got every right to do that if he believes he can negotiate. And it's our job to try and see if the club's interests are protected. But it's a commercial relationship. It's really just business. So it's not something, I don't think, that gets us particularly excited. It's just a question of what is right for Rangers Football Club. There's nothing personal about it.
Sure, but ultimately, would you like to see Mike Ashley out of the picture with regards to Rangers?
Yeah, I think ultimately he will be out of the picture. I think right now he's put money into the club, and I think the club should be grateful for that, because without the $5 million loan, the club would have had some difficulties. So I think the money was important to the club at the time, under the circumstances of the club at that time. But given the changed circumstances of the club, where we are not trying to shrink the club, we're not trying to run the club as a minor club in Scotland. We are determined, and the reason we are here is to take the club back to where it naturally belongs. And it's in that context, I think, that we have to change the relationship.
Retail revenues are
a threat to what you're trying to achieve.
Do I see?
You don't see what Mike Ashley is a threat to what you're trying to achieve here.
On a scale of 1 to 100, it doesn't get up to 1 as far as the threat's concerned.
Retail revenues are a considerable part of the club's income. Currently 75% of that goes to Sports Direct. Surely that's unmanageable even in the short term.
The retail revenues are not a significant portion. Historically, they have been. And that's the position that we're determined to restore. We're determined to get back to a situation where the retail revenues do form a significant part. And of course, that's not going to happen until the fans are happy that the relationship with Sports Direct is such that they feel that a proportionate benefit of that is going back to the club. And clearly, the fans don't believe that to be the case, which is why they're not supporting the retail at the moment.
Yeah, and I made the point. Obviously, I met Mike Ashley and his colleagues, and I made that point to him. If you look back 15 years ago, Rangers were selling 500,000 shirts a year. Now, the market's changed a bit in that period. We're now selling less than 50,000 shirts. So the actual merchant, and that's partly down to the market, but it's also down to the fact that the fans just have disengaged from that activity, believing that there's too much of the share of the profits going to parties outside the club.
But Paul, at that meeting, did Sports Direct nominate directors for the board as per their agreement?
No.
They've not tried to do that.
No, I mean that meeting was a very professional. It wasn't a kind of old pals night, but it was a professional, well-mannered meeting. We discussed a range of things. It was perfectly straightforward, and Mike Ashley was very straightforward and made his points pretty clearly. So there was no animosity. It was a very professional meeting.
Excuse me, the last couple of questions for this session, and then we'll move on.
Dave, there was a loan a few months back from George Lether and Douglas Park of £1.5 million. Has there been an additional investment since then?
Yes, there has been. I mean, there's been additional investment made. There'll be further investment made as well in the coming days. As I've said before, we have to, because of the kind of share structure and the delisting, etc. There's obviously technical issues. You can't just simply issue shares tomorrow, and so we have to provide that by way of short-term funding until, as I said before, we actually get the process of raising capital through a share issue, and that will probably coincide with a relisting of the club on the ISTX exchange.
Can you say who invested and how much?
Well, the same parties basically reinvested, and Dave will be reinvested. Well, Dave's family, I guess, will be reinvesting as well in the coming days.
How much was put in?
This is the last one.
I think another 1.5 million was provided to the club.
And what was that for? Was that for
Working
wages?
Just working capital.
Dave, can I just finally ask you how much of your own personal wealth you're willing to put into this club?
I really don't have a figure. It's really going to depend, I think, on meeting the objectives of the club. I'm not really viewing it in that sense. It's not something that is taxing my mind at all. I mean, my concern is that I'm in a fortunate position where I'm able to do it. I've already lost 20. I'm expecting to invest more than that, but it's not to a level of something that's getting attention from my family regarding the future life being threatened.